There's a balance. And what I mean by this is sometimes you'll see news stories of crazy people doing crazy things, and it is not indicative of the wider world. However, there's an inversion to this in that people assume all of these stories are outliers and fringe nonsense and everything's fine, which brings us to the optimism bias and the normalcy bias. Here we have a story from the post-millennial. Secret Service arrests Chicago public school history teacher, 41, who threatened to kill Trump and Barron. No pre-dawn raid. This one's really funny. And the reason why it's no pre-dawn raid is because we just had that story out of Provo, Utah, where there was a man saying similar things about Joe Biden. And when they showed up in a pre-dawn raid, it resulted in the death of this individual. The question is, why did they raid that man and not this woman? Now, to be fair, this guy was known to have a whole bunch of guns. And I think this lady is probably not known for having a whole bunch of guns, excuse me, especially in Chicago. But this is what I want to talk to you about with balance. I see a story like this, and the question is this woman indicative of something greater happening right now? The answer is actually yes and no. There's always crazy people saying and doing crazy things. So you need to consider that. With 300 and some odd million people in this country, you are going to have wackos. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand how this feeds into a growing political escalation, which is apparent to anyone who's paying attention. The answer being, some people seem to think that when I say we are on track for a civil war, they can't get in their mind what that means because they've not read history of this country or other countries. So the only thing they can imagine is a whole bunch of Democrats grabbing weapons and marching through the streets and a whole bunch of Republicans grabbing weapons, and they clash at the first Battle of Bull Run, which is nowhere close to what I'm talking about. I'm talking about social destabilization. I'm talking about economic collapse and balkanization. And there's some really interesting conversations about what might happen if they try to remove Trump from the ballot. Could they then remove Biden from the ballot in other states for his alleged crimes? And then what do you get? You get statewide balkanization. Who then recognizes the executive branch of this country? Yeah, you see where it's going. It doesn't result in armed factions marching to the street. It could result in something like this. Let's say Spanish Civil War. Far leftists start taking control of institutions, start arresting and locking people up and torturing them. And then eventually you get a prominent military figure with many loyal individuals who follow his orders, and thus civil war starts when a military, when a branch of the military or a high-ranking individual says, we're not following this anymore. So let's say someone in law enforcement, in military or whatever, and I'm talking about anyone, like you can't have this perception of what is legal and what is not legal, because all that is what people are willing to do. What if someone who's in the military says, we are going to go and shut down these prisons that are torturing American citizens because we've sworn an oath to defend this country from enemies, both foreign and domestic? Something like that. You might be arguing they have no authority to do that. They would never do that. Yeah, a lot of people are doing things without the authority to do so, right? The point is, you need to stop thinking in terms of rigid human structures. There are a lot of people. I love this. I love this example. There are people who think that if you sign a contract, I'm sorry, it's like I tricked you into signing away power of attorney. Aha, now I can sell your house. Yeah, that'll never work. It just won't, because humans interpret. So you might be tricked into signing a contract, and then they go, you have these TV shows like they did that one on Netflix about AI, Black Mirror, where they're like, well, no, you signed the contract and now they have the rights to your life. It's like, oh, darn. Does not fly. You can't trick someone into entering a contract. The judge will just throw it out and say the contract is void. The thing is, humans decide whether or not things are upheld, and courts have very little enforcement power. When the Supreme Court says a thing, it's mostly just because people decide they have to do it because they said so. If at some point a large faction says, I'll just decide to do something else, then something else be done. Here's the story. A Chicago former social studies teacher, woman, was arrested by federal agents on Monday after she allegedly threatened to shoot GOP frontrunner Donald Trump and his youngest son, Barron. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago, 41-year-old Tracy Marie Fiorenza was arrested on Monday morning on the charge of transmitting threats to kill or injure, the Daily Mail reported. I'm not going to read what she said, but she made these threats, very insane threats. The email was reportedly sent to the head of the Palm Beach Area Educational Institution. In a similar email, Fiorenza allegedly wrote on June 5th that she would, into Barron Trump, with his father in self-defense. I just want to point out, you get these Twitch streamers who are like, we should all go and commit X action in a video game. Dude, that does not work. Okay? Please take this into consideration. Leftist streamers who advance criminal action, but say in a video game. We should all go and overthrow in a video game. You see? Yeah, it doesn't work. Doesn't work. She said in self-defense, and then they came and arrested her for it. You see how that works? Agents reportedly interviewed Fiorenza on June 14th at the agency's Chicago field office, during which time she was shown copies of the emails and admitted to sending them, agents said. The affidavit states that Fiorenza lives in Plainfield, Illinois, a Chicago suburb. Wow, that's crazy. I know Plainfield all too well. According to CBS News Chicago, Fiorenza made her first court appearance on Monday afternoon, where a judge said that her case must be heard in Florida, where the charges were filed. She is scheduled to appear back in Chicago's federal court on Wednesday, where the judge will decide how she will be transported to Florida. On Facebook, going by the name Tracy Fiorenza de Rothschild, she claims to be a former social studies teacher at Chicago public schools. In one post, she wrote that the Trump family Hollywood pedo ring in the arts followed home staff and students from Oxbridge Academy in St. Andrew's Episcopal Church School in Maryland. Barron Trump was so this is like insane psycho conspiracy stuff. Barron Trump was enrolled in classes at both educational institutions, but never physically attended a single day. Blah, blah, blah. This is nuts. These people are crazy. She is convinced. This is Blue Anon, like Democrat psycho conspiracy babble stuff. She posted a photo of a Trump effigy hanging. This is crazy. I suppose a lot of people are surprised there was no pre-dawn raid for this violent and deranged individual. Let me just stress, when you get a 300-pound guy posting pictures of himself in body armor with weapons, you're probably a bit more concerned about your safety, despite the fact the man was 70 years old. When you have a small, frail woman doing the same thing, you probably consider a lot less. So I'm just going to say, you can't come to me and say, like, these small, petite women have no business being cops because they're being overpowered by a single man. There's that viral video where one guy just beats 3 female officers and they can't do anything about it. If we recognize that women tend to be smaller, less muscle mass, less bone density, et cetera, yeah, I don't think the feds are going to be all too worried about some frail woman in her house. She doesn't appear to be armed. It is what it is. But where do we go from here? Let's talk about the real elements of what could lead to civil war. We have institutional collapse, weaponization of government. You've got individuals being held without charge or trial in violation of the Constitution, due process, etc., in these prisons in D.C. over January 6th. One individual is just seen in photographs in what appears to be a janitor's mop closet. Crazy. This is torture. You have this story. Pickup truck mows down multiple pedestrians as it flees cop car after doing donuts in Atlanta street show. Social order breaking down. No confidence in the system, no confidence in law enforcement, no respect for the system at all. These trucks going about their business because they don't think the cops are going to do anything about it. And if the cops try, they don't think the cops have any authority. The authority of the police officer only extends into their physical abilities. You take a look at the far left. They have something called de-arrest. A cop will arrest someone. The activists will attack the police and pull that person away and de-arrest them. Why? Because they understand the concept of natural law. Conservatives live very much in this rigid world where it's like, you can't do that because the law says. Leftists live in this world of you can do anything so long as you have power. So they will take these actions. But let's think about the natural conclusion to these things. People increasingly getting more violent and targeting politicians. Not that I think this story is anything more, the Secret Service one, like this lady was just nuts. But you take a look at social order breakdown in these cities. And eventually, you're going to have an inverse. Right now, you have many of these people on the left doing whatever they want. I say they're on the left, but many of these people who vote Democrat, mind you, or don't vote at all, they're looting Nordstrom, they're looting Nike, they're storming into 7-Elevens, they're just taking whatever they want, just stealing from Walgreens, and it's been getting worse over the past several years. Eventually, you'll get the inverse, vigilantes. I mean, it's not even fair to call them vigilantes. If there's no law enforcement, then law enforcement must emerge. How soon until we get locals getting armed and guarding stores? How soon after that do you have people just acting like the federal government and law enforcement and the county sheriff and all that don't matter? Because you're going to have a guy who says, the only one stopping this crime is going to be me. And then the police likely will go after the law-abiding citizens. Why? It is infinitely easier to arrest someone who believes in the law than someone who doesn't. Someone who believes in the law is going to be like, well, okay, I guess you got me. But my point is this. Eventually, no one will believe in the law. So when that sheriff or that federal law enforcement agent shows up to this neighborhood watch who's been guarding their local supermarket, and they say, you are acting illegally with illegal weapons, blah, 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 these people are going to be like, you are just some random people who've shown up. Imagine it this way. Your grocery store keeps getting looted. We see the videos over and over again, people going in, filling up carts and just leaving. Eventually, the supermarket announces we're going to have to shut down because this is not sustainable. Locals who need the supermarket say we're going to form a watch group to guard this store and prevent the shoplifting. Eventually, someone comes in, tries stealing a bunch of stuff. A fight breaks out. The person's armed. There's a shootout. Somebody dies. The local neighborhood watch security group then has the local police come and medics deal with the issue and take the body. But then you get the lawsuits, the anger, the protests, the riots. Federal law enforcement shows up. But consider it this way. In your mind, you're imagining a guy in a uniform with a badge. Now understand that if people don't have confidence in that badge and that system, the man may as well be a dude in a flannel and blue jeans. Now imagine this. A neighborhood watch group guarding their store from violent criminals who are armed and have hurt people in the past and are trying to destroy their community. These people are armed guarding the store when several vehicles pull up and men with guns jump out. These men are wearing white t-shirts and blue jeans. The people guarding the store are going to say, get down and drop your weapons. And the people in the blue jeans are going to say, no, you drop your weapons. The point is, obviously, I'm referring to law enforcement pulling up. But if the people who live in this community feel like there is no law enforcement the same way the criminals do, you see where this goes. This is where we get into Civil War territory. When police break down, not to mention many of these cops will be locals and they'll say, we're not going to enforce this. There's going to be local cops who are like, our hands are tied. We can't arrest these people because the courts let them go. So vigilante groups arise and take the place of security. These police are then told to go and stop the vigilante groups. And they say, no way. That's John. He runs the barbershop. That's Janet. She runs the bakery. I'm not going to go and screw with them. They're my neighbors. State law enforcement has to come in. These guys are foreigners as far as anyone else is concerned. And they say, get out. You don't enforce the laws here at all. We're not going to stand for it. That is the breaking point. But I don't know exactly how this plays out. I'm just saying. This is what people don't seem to understand. They seem to think it's going to be like all the red state governors come together and sign a decree and say, we hereby declare civil war. Bang. Yeah, no. Not going to happen that way. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.